The telephone rang inside a quiet Parisian apartment. Mahmoud Hamshari, a key figure in the Palestinian terrorist network, picked up the receiver, offering a warm greeting to the Italian journalist on the other end. Down the street, inside a nondescript parked car, Mossad agents waited, every second stretched out painfully. The conversation played out casually, and then came the moment they'd been waiting for. Hamshari confirmed his identity. Without a word, a signal was sent. In the next heartbeat, everything would change. It was one of the most audacious assassination plots in history, and it was only just getting started. Number 3. Operation Wrath of God. In September 1972, 8 members of the Palestinian terror group scaled the fences of the Olympic Village in Munich. Armed with assault rifles, they stormed an apartment building that was housing the Israeli Olympic team. What followed was a bloody, brutal standoff. By the end, 11 Israeli athletes were dead. The global outcry was immediate. Yet Israeli Prime Minister Golda Meir, cautious of escalating further violence, initially resisted the urge to retaliate. Then, just months later, the outrage deepened. West Germany released the 3 surviving terrorists, caving to pressure after hijackers seized Lufthansa Flight 615. In the aftermath of the Munich massacre, a secretive task force, codenamed Committee X, was established to determine Israel's response. Now it had the green light to act. What followed would become the longest-running and most extensive targeted assassination campaign in modern history. The goal was simple: eliminate every single surviving terrorist connected to the killing of the 11 Israelis at the Olympics. This policy of strict deterrence was meant to convince any would-be terrorists that any and all acts of violence would be reciprocated with extreme vengeance. Already, the Israeli Air Force and the Army had destroyed several terrorist bases in Syria and elsewhere in the Middle East. But it wasn't enough. Using a combination of spies and double agents embedded within the Palestinian Liberation Organization, or PLO, as well as their own and Western intelligence, Israel soon had a list of targets. It remains classified even to this day, but up to 35 names were identified. But if Israel was going to retaliate, it needed 2 things: certainty and plausible deniability. First, every member on the unofficial kill list needed to be verified as having taken part in the Munich attack. This would slow the scale of the operation, even taking up to 20 years to successfully complete in some cases. But just as vital as certainty was plausible deniability. With the Middle East on the brink, any misstep could ignite a new war. Israel had to strike with precision and in ways that left no fingerprints. The assassinations had to be clean, quiet, and utterly untraceable. This would lead to some of the most innovative assassinations in modern history. But Israel didn't just want to kill, it wanted to send a message. It wanted any future terrorist to think twice before taking action. Each target needed to be eliminated in a way that kept Israel's hands officially clean, while planting a seed of fear in the minds of others. No matter where they were, no matter how much time had passed, death could come at any moment. With the list in hand, Mossad was tasked with carrying out the mission and immediately got to the task of forming specialized hunter-killer teams. Each team included 15 people, divided into 5 squads, each squad named after a letter of the Hebrew alphabet. Each Mossad kill team operated like a miniature covert military unit, highly trained, compartmentalized, and ruthlessly efficient. At the core were the 2 assassins, specialists in lethal force. Their training went far beyond handling pistols or knives. They also possessed basic chemistry knowledge and expertise in firearms. Protecting them were 2 bodyguards armed with concealed weapons, ranging from handguns and knives to compact submachine guns and grenades. 6 to 8 agents handled scouting and reconnaissance, tracking targets on the ground, and analyzing financial records. The recon team would also be responsible with planning the escape route for the kill team and its security detail, with multiple options to adapt to possibly dynamic situations. There were also communication specialists, trained in using miniature recording devices and field radios for the teams to keep in constant communication. Lastly, 2 agents would provide public cover for the entire operation, doing everything from renting hotel rooms and cars, or even leasing property. It was their job to provide the necessary cover that Israel needed for plausible deniability. With intelligence in place and personnel ready to move, Israel was ready to unleash its vengeance upon the world. The first killing occurred on October 16, 1972. Somewhere in Lebanon, Palestinian author and Black September member Wael Zweiter's family received a knock on their door. A delivery driver dropped off a special delivery, a bouquet of flowers with a card that read, "A reminder, we do not forget or forgive." 1,300 miles away, Wael Zweiter was on his way home from dinner. Previously detained and questioned by the Italian authorities for suspected links to a Black September bombing at an oil refinery, Zweiter had been released for lack of evidence, but Mossad had made up its mind. That night, two assassins waited in the lobby of Zuwaiter's apartment building. Notified of his arrival via earpiece, the agent stepped forward, drew concealed handguns, and opened fire. 12 bullets tore into Zuwaiter's head and chest. The first name on the list was crossed off. Almost 2 months later, a Mossad kill team arrived in France. Their target was Mahmoud Hamshari, a representative of the PLO in France and suspected leader of the French wing of Black September. Mossad believed that he was directly involved in the Munich attack, and for his part, Hamshari stated in an interview a day after the massacre that he wasn't worried for his life, but he didn't wish to taunt the devil. One of the Mossad operatives posed as an Italian journalist, arranging an interview with Mahmoud Hamshari. The meeting provided the cover for the rest of the kill team to enter his apartment and plant a small explosive device directly beneath his telephone. On December 8th, the fake journalist called Hamshari under the guise of continuing an interview and asked the speaker at the end of the line if they were indeed Mahmoud Hamshari. When Hamshari confirmed his identity, the team's technical expert triggered a command signal down the phone line. A second later, the explosive detonated, mortally wounding Hamshari. As the new year began, a separate Mossad kill team made their way to Cyprus. Their target, Hussein al-Bashir, believed by Israel to be Black September's chief operative on the island. Unknown to him, Mossad agents had already breached his hotel room and planted a deadly surprise. On the night of January 24, 1973, the team watched from a distance, binoculars trained on al-Bashir's window. When the lights clicked off, they knew his routine, thanks to previous surveillance, that they were certain that he would head straight to bed. Minutes later, a team member sent a radio signal. The explosive hidden beneath the mattress detonated, tearing through the room and killing al-Bashir instantly. For years afterwards, members of the PLO and Black September would check under their beds before daring to fall asleep. As with every victim on Mossad's kill list, al-Bashir's family had already received a bouquet of flowers and a condolence letter. On April 6, 1973, Basil al-Kubaisi returned to his hotel room in Paris. He was not believed to be directly linked to the Munich attack, but Mossad had evidence that he directly aided Black September by coordinating weapons shipments and other logistics. His inclusion on the kill list was controversial, but in the end deemed justified due to the violence that he facilitates. As al-Kubaisi walked down Rue Chauveau-Lagarde, he turned a corner and ran straight into two assassins of Mossad's kill team. The two expert marksmen unloaded between 9 and 12 shots into Kubaisi. Mohammed Youssef al-Najjar, operations leader for Black September, Kamal Adwan, a chief operations within the PLO, and Kamal Nasser, PLO executive committee member and spokesman for the organization, were all tied to the Munich attack. The problem was that they live in heavily protected homes deep inside Lebanon. There was simply no way the Mossad kill team could get to them on its own. Instead, Israel Special Forces stepped in to lend their aid. Since January, a Mossad agent, codenamed Nielsen, had been living undercover in Beirut, posing as a writer. From her apartment situated directly across from the buildings where targets Kamal Nasser, Kamal Adwan, and Mohammed Najjar lived, she maintained constant surveillance. Nielsen recorded their daily routines, the movements of nearby civilians, and the habits of their bodyguards and PLO troops. She also scouted the coastline, identifying potential landing sites for a commando raid. Her photographs and detailed reports were quietly funneled back to Israel. Mossad was put on the sidelines for this one, as the go-ahead was given to IDF Special Operations Commandos. On the night of April 9th, 8 Israeli missile boats slipped out of the naval base at Haifa. On board were 75 elite Special Forces soldiers from various top-tier units, along with 19 Zodiac speedboats. 12 miles off the coast of Beirut, the strike force dropped anchor and waited for the signal. Mossad contacted Agent Nielsen, who confirmed the targets were inside their apartments. With the green light given, the raiding party moved to shore. Disguised as tourists, many dressed as women, complete with heavy makeup, they blended into the Beirut nightlife. To avoid drawing attention, each raider was carefully carried to the beach by a commando, keeping them dry and ready for action. Their operation had begun. Rented cars dropped off the assassin team 2 blocks from their target, weapons hidden under their clothing. The men approached on foot, posing as couples to avoid suspicion. 3 kill teams entered the buildings. A 4th remained outside, tasked with perimeter security and ready to intercept any PLO reinforcements or Lebanese security forces. When they had arrived, they were surprised to find the PLO guards they had anticipated confronting were asleep in their vehicles. Once at the apartment doors, each team attached breaching charges and prepared for synchronized entry. Using their radios, they sent the signal, 3 clicks back to the operation commander, indicating they were in position. The response was 5 clicks, the signal to strike. The commandos detonated the breaching charges, blasting open the doors of all 3 apartments and storming inside. Mohammed Youssef al-Najjar bolted from his bedroom, locking himself in another room. Unaware that his wife was also inside, the commandos opened fire through the door, fatally injuring them both. In another apartment, Kamal Nasser was seated at his desk. He had just enough time to grab a pistol. He managed to shoot one of the commandos in the leg before being gunned down in a hail of bullets. In the chaos of the raid and the hurried exfiltration, an elderly Italian woman was caught in the crossfire and accidentally killed as the teams fought to escape. The raid was a success. At the time, 2 additional operations targeted Palestinian terrorist cells elsewhere in Beirut, dealing a heavy blow to the PLO. The 3 primary targets on the kill list were eliminated and managed to gather a wealth of intelligence from documents seized in their apartments. It would allow the IDF to significantly weaken the PLO's network of terror operations across the region. Operation Wrath of God was only just the beginning. Over the next 2 decades, Mossad would eliminate more than 20 high-value targets, using everything from poison-laced toothpaste to shrapnel bombs and close-range executions in dark alleyways. Number 2. ISIS leader Qasem al-Rimi. In 2020, the world got a glimpse of some of the cutting-edge technology the United States uses to eliminate terrorists. Qasem al-Rimi was a wanted man, the leader of a fading al-Qaeda, a group that had spent nearly 2 decades in the crosshairs of the relentless U.S. military and intelligence operations. Globally, al-Qaeda's once sprawling terror network had been shattered. What remained was a shadow of its former self, with pockets of die-hard followers in the Middle East, Sub-Saharan Africa, and the Western Pacific. Al-Rimi had the unenviable job that soon made him public enemy number 1 for the entire Western intelligence apparatus. With al-Qaeda on the ropes, he assumed the leadership of al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula, or AQAP, in 2015. He'd already made headlines earlier when he escaped from a Yemeni prison in February 2006, only to orchestrate a suicide bombing a year later that killed 7 Spanish tourists and 2 Yemeni drivers. His skill for organization and leadership didn't go unnoticed. Al-Rimi's ruthless efficiency helped him climb the ranks of AQAP and cemented his place atop every most wanted list. In 2014, the United States placed a $10 million bounty on al-Rimi's head, and intelligence operatives worked around the clock to track the elusive terror leader. America's global war on terror was relentless, claiming high-value targets with increasing frequency. But al-Rimi was a survivor, though, and he would elude the United States' efforts to kill or capture him. In 2017, the United States thought it had its man, but al-Rimi eluded capture yet again. In an operation infamously known as the Yakla Raid, the United States and Saudi Arabia cooperated on a joint operation to take down al-Rimi inside Yemen. Military officials would later state that the raid was carried out, quote, without sufficient intelligence, ground support, or adequate backup preparations. Al-Rimi would capitalize on the U.S.'s mistake. On January 29th, elite Navy SEAL operators, along with Special Forces soldiers from the United Arab Emirates, launched an assault into a village believed to be housing al-Rimi. The raid resulted in the death of 1 Navy SEAL, the serious injuring of 3 additional American Special Forces operators, and the loss of an Osprey aircraft as the assault force met heavy resistance. It also resulted in the killing of numerous civilians caught in the crossfire. But the United States was persistent. Al-Rimi had proven incredibly elusive prey, not making the mistake of using private cell phones or any other form of electronic communications directly. He often wore disguises and was keenly aware of both America's use of drones, cyber warfare, and human intelligence. What he had significantly underestimated was the technological advancements made by the U.S. in how it used its drones. Given the technology involved, details remain highly classified. However, leaks and commentary by military and defense personnel in the following years hint at what occurred. Hiding out in Yemen, the United States used a small fleet of extremely long-endurance drones to carry out 24/7 surveillance over areas al-Rimi was suspected to be hiding in. Surveillance missions could be highly effective when operated by human analysts, especially when spotting obvious targets like tanks, artillery, or military convoys. But finding a single individual hidden among a sea of faces was impossible for any human being. So the CIA turned to artificial intelligence instead. Using advanced facial recognition software and cameras sharp enough to capture individual faces from over 10,000 feet in the air, the CIA turned to artificial intelligence to do what no human could. They fed the raw video streams to the AI, letting it tirelessly comb through every frame until it found its mark. High above, drones flew at altitudes too high to be detected from the ground, silently tracking the suspected al-Rimi. Over the course of days, the CIA gathered enough intelligence to be absolutely certain they had their man. On January 31, 2020, al-Rimi climbed into a car with senior AQAP leader Abul al-Bara al-Ibi. Minutes later, once they'd reached a stretch of road with no other vehicles or civilians around, a single Hellfire missile struck the vehicle, instantly incinerating both occupants. After nearly a decade of hunting, the U.S. had finally got its man. The operation didn't just mark the end of al-Rimi, it showcased the staggering power of modern intelligence gathering. The world now knew the US had eyes in the sky capable of picking out a single face from thousands without the target ever realizing they were being watched. Number 1. Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi. In what has to be the first and only case of its kind in human history, stolen underwear directly led to the assassination of a top terror leader. Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi was an ISIS OG, being a part of the Mujahideen Shura Council, which would become the Islamic State of Iraq or ISI in 2006. He would go on to take over ISI in 2010 after a joint American and Iraqi military raid killed Abu Omar al-Baghdadi. After the killing of Osama bin Laden in his Pakistani safe house, he vowed retaliation, carrying out a vicious campaign of bombings and gun attacks against U.S. troops and Iraqi military, police, and lawmakers. News broke in 2012 when on December 2nd, Iraqi officials claimed to have captured al-Baghdadi. However, this was soon revealed to be false due to a misidentification of a regional ISI commander captured instead. Al-Baghdadi soon set his sights on bigger ambitions. Seizing the chaos of Syria's civil war, he announced the formation of the Islamic State of Iraq and the Levant, also known to the world as ISIL, or more commonly ISIS. The move dramatically expanded al-Baghdadi's influence and prestige, especially as ISIS made rapid, shocking gains across the region. Their brutal success triggered a swift and forceful response from the US and its allies. However, al-Baghdadi's success was wearing thin on his al-Qaeda allies, with Ayman al-Zawahiri stating his opinion that ISIS should be disbanded, and the group focused solely on Iraq. Al-Baghdadi responded by taking over 80% of the al-Qaeda commander's forces and absorbing them under his command, officially causing a split between ISIS and al-Qaeda in 2014. The United States and its allies responded with overwhelming force, bombing ISIS's self-declared capital of Raqqa so relentlessly that al-Baghdadi was forced to flee, badly wounded. He escaped to Mosul, where another wave of airstrikes sparked rumors of his death. But in reality, al-Baghdadi had been wounded during a strike in Al-Qaim, near the Iraqi border, and slipped even deeper into Syria's chaotic war zones. The US placed him at the top of its most wanted list, determined to sever the head of the ISIS snake once and for all. Over the years, intelligence operatives pinpointed his location multiple times, yet each time a strike was prepared, it was called off. The heavy civilian presence made the risks too high. If they were going to kill one of the world's most wanted terrorists, they needed to be sure they were hitting their target and limiting civilian casualties as much as possible. In order to keep the coalition hunting him off his tracks, al-Baghdadi allegedly never slept in the same place more than once. He frequently hopped back and forth across the Iraqi and Syrian border to throw pursuing intelligence operatives off his scent. Unlike other prominent terror figures, al-Baghdadi also did not keep large amounts of bodyguards, preferring to keep his entourage as small as possible to avoid raising suspicion. One of the slaves that al-Baghdadi had kept later testified in 2017 that he tried to escape to Idlib along with a wife and a few of his guards, but had feared an imminent attempt on his life and turned back. He also refused to use cell phones or any form of traceable electronics, frequently using handwritten or tape-recorded messages delivered by runners. Al-Baghdadi's brother-in-law would give an interview after his death, stating that during the final few months of his life, as the US noose tightened around his neck, al-Baghdadi had become a nervous, paranoid wreck. He kept an explosive vest on himself at all times and ordered those closest to him to do so as well. Due to the stress and his constant need to change locations, his diabetes had significantly worsened and his health declined. Because al-Baghdadi was constantly changing residences, locating him was proving difficult. However, America's Kurdish allies would come in clutch. After al-Baghdadi moved to the city of Idlib, a Kurdish spy identified him, but the CIA needed hard proof before they would authorize an attack. So, the spy managed to infiltrate al-Baghdadi's safe house and steal a pair of dirty underwear. The used underwear immediately underwent a DNA test proving a 100% match for the ISIS leader. Shortly after, a joint force of American Delta Force operators, Army Rangers, and airborne soldiers launched a daring mission, secretly penetrating Russian-controlled airspace in Syria to reach the Turkish border, where al-Baghdadi was hiding. Apache helicopters, surveillance drones, and fighter jets provided air cover for the inbound assault team as they closed in on their target. As the assault force approached, their helicopters were fired on by non-ISIS-affiliated militants, who earned the wrath of the accompanying Apaches for their troubles. Upon arriving, the assault force surrounded the compound and called for everyone inside to surrender. Knowing that there were children inside, U.S. forces wanted to minimize any collateral damage. Some occupants surrendered as instructed, but a group of 5 refused to surrender and were neutralized. Rather than use the front entrance, which they believed to be booby-trapped, the assault force breached the side of the main building with explosives. Al-Baghdadi fled into an underground tunnel while wearing an explosive vest and carrying 2 children with him. He was chased into the tunnel by a military working dog and an explosive ordnance disposal robot that was going to be used to neutralize him. According to some accounts, al-Baghdadi had been so surprised that he was in his underwear as he fled. Before the robot could get to him, however, al-Baghdadi detonated his vest, burying himself and the children in rubble and injuring the American canine. Soldiers quickly dug through the rubble until they found parts of human remains that they believed belonged to al-Baghdadi. The remains were rushed out of the tunnel, and DNA analysis was conducted on the scene by Defense Intelligence Agency personnel, who positively identified al-Baghdadi within 15 minutes. You've seen how far nations will go to eliminate a threat. Now uncover the boldest hits that didn't just silence targets, but reshaped history itself in insane assassinations that changed the world.